We're just under 40 days to elections, and something very sinister is happening to our state institutions at a time when we need them the most. I'm talking about trust in state institutions at an all-time low. In addition to that, the public view of these state institutions, assessing them on whether or not they are corrupt or not, is also at its all-time low. And that is the story of the Afrobarometer report, and we're going to get into that. We are reserving some time to look at this because it has implications, especially as you approach such high-stakes elections when some of these institutions will come to play in terms of mitigating the impact of a disputed elections possibly. But in itself, some of them, like the police, getting into the midst of ensuring that we have a peaceful elections. If you just look at the subject of corruption, we've known over the period, anytime the reports have come out, that the police will be on top. And we know that the IGP had done some great work to improve this particular narrative when it comes to the police. But over the period, you've seen that the police is still there. In this latest Afrobarometer report, they are still top of the pile when it comes to the institutions perceived by the citizens of being the most corrupt. And then you look at the office of the presidency. And again, they come in at 54%. The second most corrupt, according to the people who were surveyed by the Afrobarometer reporters across the country. You look at the tax officials coming in third. And as we know, this is no surprise, really. As for these three, no surprise. Again, you look at the MPs, again, no surprise from the political stock. You look at judges and magistrates. That is a big one. That is a big one indeed. And it comes back to the point I made at the start of this. This will be our last line of defense. And it has been. It was in 2012. It was, again, as we've seen in the last elections when, again, we went to the Supreme Court. The NDC went to the Supreme Court to challenge it. It was a last line of defense. It has been. It has proved very pivotal in putting and ensuring that this country remains intact, even when there are disputed elections. To think that when it comes to corruption, it's in the fifth place, the fifth most corrupt institution. It is one that should fill us with a lot of dread and trepidation. But I'll ask my guests, when I say corrupt, what exactly are we talking about here? What is the definition of corrupt? Is it simply the perception that they take bribes, which often when we define corruption in Ghana, people tend to narrow it down to that definition? Or is far more than that? Does it also have to do with a perception of bias in judgments that are put out by the courts, that people simply lack the trust in the judgments put out by the judges and the magistrates, and they believe that particular process is corruptly procured? We'll get into that and get some clarity for you. And here is the ultimate institution that will be conducting this year's elections, the sixth most corrupt, according to the survey that was by the Afrobarometer. But I also want to isolate the presidency and the MPs. And this is no surprise, really, because the presidency and the MPs, the politicians, have always been the bag of the bad apples and oranges, if you like. And they seem to be competing on the subject of corruption. Over the period, you will see that the difference between the two, MPs and the presidency, isn't great on this particular subject. And then you come to the police and judges, right? Of course, if you're comparing the two, it won't be a surprise that you have the police, when it comes to perception, on top when you compare to the judges, because we interact on a daily basis with the police, but not everybody interacts with the judges. So for the fact that they are this close itself should be of great concern to the judiciary. And the Chief Justice, watching this and listening to the commentary on this and reading the Afrobarometer report, must be significantly concerned about this particular picture. And then you talk about the corruption levels, which appear to have gone up quite significantly. The last time that the Afrobarometer report was done in 2022, and now you've seen that it was 77% in 2022. It's come down just slightly to 74%. But then you look at what it was in 2014, it was at 83%. So that is significant indeed. But the Afrobarometer report talks about, compared from last year to this year, there's been an increase though in the what people perceive to be the status of corruption in this country. And Daniel Demelo, the former Auditor General, will join me to have a conversation about this. Is he surprised by any of this? And I'd like to also isolate this picture for you when it comes to the government fight against corruption. And you will see here that the fight against corruption is in shambles, according to the Afrobarometer report. I mean, 82% of people say the fight against corruption has been very, very bad. I mean, combined there, it's been poor indeed. And so it isn't great. And you look at the fact that coming from 2022, it was at 85%. It just dropped slightly. So let's put it in a bigger context here. The Akufo-Addo administration, in terms of the fight against corruption, in the 12 years of Afrobarometer, has had the two worst periods when it comes to Afrobarometer. Two worst periods in these 12 years compared to the entire period. I mean, the only time you can see this is in anything that came close to the Akufo-Addo's poor performance on evaluating his fight against corruption was in 2014 when John Dramani Mahama was the president at 74. It tells a story that he was a president before, Akufo-Addo took over from him, and yes, he was in terrible territory. Historically, worst performance when it comes to corruption, according to the Afrobarometer, at the time that they started it, because this was just the second time they were doing it. We didn't have the years before that. But if you compare the 12 years, it was terrible at this time. And you think it couldn't be worse. But yes, Akufo-Addo managed to take us all the way to 85%, according to the Afrobarometer report, and had just managed to drop by 3% there. Not great. And so that tells a story, right? And then you have to make a decision for yourself if this is going to be a subject for you to vote this year or a basis for voting. Then you have to make a decision on what the Afrobarometer is saying. But a very interesting point that the Afrobarometer says that in terms of the issues that you anchor your decision on, it is first the honesty of the candidates. 90% of Ghanaians say honesty of the candidates will influence your votes. And then you come to the subject of character, 88%. In fact, the campaign promises that tend to dominate the airwaves, only 59% of Ghanaians say that will influence your vote. So the politicians will have to have a rethink. But I want to show you this broad picture here, just to give you a sense of something that I found quite fascinating. And considering that this current president has just 2 months over just to hand over and leave, his legacy is important. If you look at in terms of the trust in institutions, this was talking about trust in institutions. The president was the only individual who was assessed, although the Afrobarometer was looking at trust in institutions, right? And something very interesting pops up there. In the year this president became president in 2017, he came in at 73%. That is significant indeed. That 73% of Ghanaians trusted him. Never seen in the 12-year history of the Afrobarometer. In fact, to the point that the Ghana Armed Forces that historically have been the most trusted institution only bettered him at the time by just 2% when it was at 75%. That tells you something, that the expectation at the time was enormous. But he also came in with significant trust. That one individual, the trust in him, the president, was better than most of the institutions that were also measured. Institutions against individual. 73% of Ghanaians said at the time in 2017 that they trusted the president, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. So that was significant at the time. But look at what has happened over the period. The drop has also been monumental indeed. And just look here for me. It's dropped over the period, but of course that will also include the period of John Mahama and all. But if you look at that, the president has dropped in terms of people's trust in him by some 29%. But the thing I want to emphasize, and just look in here, the institution that has lost the most trust in the 12 years of the Afrobarometer is the Electoral Commission by 30%. And that is where we'll start our conversation tonight. What do you do to fix this? With just over 30 days to a make or break elections with high stakes, when among all the institutions surveyed in 12 years, over that period, the Electoral Commission has seen the lowest decline, net decline in trust. That is worrying. And it is at its lowest point this year, just before the elections. It says a lot, and we need to really unpack that, understand it, and see if anything can happen between now and December 7th to fix this, because it's setting us up to a very explosive period, especially when the traditional arbiters are themselves not trusted. The courts, 22% lost in trust over the period. Again, at this lowest point at 35. So we don't trust the Electoral Commission at this lowest point. The only place you can go to get some remedy and have some redress, if you believe that the outcome they supervise isn't free, fair, and transparent, you have to go to the courts. And yet, the courts themselves are 35% low, right, this year. So something needs to be done there. We'll talk about that. Again, you look at the free and fair elections over the period. Again, this is last election. Dropped by 34% compared to the previous one in 2016. And the issue I was talking about. And this, if you're a candidate, you're paying attention to this, asking yourself, what do I do now to convince the electorate that I am honest, that my character is beyond par, beyond reproach? Because the two most important things that would influence votes this year, according to the Afrobarometer report, is not your promises, it is your honesty and character. And that for me is very, very important. My guests are joining me for a conversation. Please stay with us. Thanks for staying with us here on PM Express. It's always brought to you by Syntax Times. It is strong, it is tough. Academic Times is Ghana is an incoming graphic and online publication aiming to collaborate with university authorities and students to ensure that student research is published in some form. And Syntax Times, Ghana, get ready for the biggest giveaway from Syntax Times. Syntax is visiting 15 communities, giving to them free water. And this is to say thank you, Ghana, for making us number one. Now, if you are a community and you want to benefit from Syntax free water giveaway, you just log into their social media handles at Syntax Ghana and nominate your community. Syntax Times, a strong, a tough. Guest joining me, Daniel Domelevo is a former Auditor General, joins us on Zoom. Professor Bafo Ejimendria is a former senior UN governance advisor, joins us on Zoom too. In the studio with me is Xavier Kuja, is the spokesperson, the PRO for the Ghana Bar Association. Dr. Kojo Asante is the Director of Policy Engagement and Partnerships at the CDD. And of course, CDD is the responsible. They actually conduct the Afrobarometer surveys, and it's good to have him. I want to start with him, Kojo, because I look at the report and much has been said about it, but I want to focus for a second because of where we are on the Electoral Commission and the point I was making earlier about if we look at the institutions that will naturally tend to ensure that the process towards elections itself, after, during, is free, peaceful, credible. They themselves are at the bottom of the pile. And I wonder, in putting this report together and traveling the country, yes, it tells us where we are, but does it give us any sense of how to mitigate what we are seeing in the Afrobarometer report with just under 40 days to an election? Something must be done, certainly. Hello, Dr. Sante. Kindly unmute for me.
Yeah, sorry, I was muted. Yes, good evening again to the panelists and then to your viewers as well. Yes, I mean, I think there's always a lot that can be done. 40 days is still a long time to the election. Everything that we do every day to election can help improve people's confidence in the electoral process. I think the Electoral Commission has taken some of the steps that are needed to improve transparency, to build confidence in the process. and it can continue to do more. I think if you look at the trend data, I think the trend data is what is alarming.
Yes.
Right? It's that over time, the trust in the electoral management body has declined significantly. And there has to be a really serious introspection, even as we overcome, the challenges for this election. One other data point, which also gives us maybe some comfort, is that if you ask people the assessment of the previous election, they do indicate at least 60% indicated that it was free and fair. If you combine those who say it was free and fair or free and fair with minor problems, that's about 60%, indicating that in spite of the challenges of the electoral management body, the processes of our election itself um, uh, provides certain safeguards that allows us to overcome maybe the weaknesses and the image issues of the Electoral Commission. I'll take, for example, the processes of at the polling station of openly, counting votes and everybody sees what happens. We have challenges at the collations and process and so on and so forth. But these processes help to give people a certain confidence that the process is open and transparent. So I think even though it looks very, very bad, we still have those other processes that helps to mitigate, those deficiencies. But it's to say that, you cannot be running an electoral management body with that level of trust levels. I mean, basically, our entire democracy cannot be hovering around these types of trust levels. Any kind of organization would really struggle and be close to collapse. So there's a real introspection to be had for electoral management body, but the entire system really needs a serious look at.
Yeah, I mean, and I want to bring in Professor Bafo Jimendria into this conversation. Prof, if you look at the specifics, though, over the last the 12-year period that the Afrobarometer had gathered this data, that you've seen the Electoral Commission emerge as an institution that has lost the most trust over that period in terms of the trend. In 2012, when we had the elections, it produced an outcome. Of course, part of it went to the Supreme Court, and the Court of Appeal decided on that. So it was contested. In 2016, the outcome was uncontested. It was so significant. We went about our lives, and everybody trusted the outcome was free, fair, and yet you see that drop didn't stop. It actually continued the downward trajectory. In 2020, again we had an outcome. Part of it again was challenged, but largely we went about after the courts had affirmed the position of the commission. And then we are approaching 2024, and the trust had dropped even further. And we've always said over the period that the monitors go and they monitor the elections. They come out and tell us that our elections are pretty robust in terms of the structures that we have in place. The international community tell us same. In fact, the last election, we have the EU, we have the AU, all giving thumbs up to our elections. All our elections I've mentioned, the period I have been assessed, have all had great reviews, both locally and internationally by bodies. So where's the disconnect between that which we claim to be robust and what we are now learning in the Afrobarometer surveys?
Well, good evening to my very good friends on the panel and to you, Evans. I think you're right, and that's what Kojo said. The process itself is great, and Afarijan used to say that. If you look at how Ghana's electoral process has been structured from beginning to the end, it allows full participation by stakeholders. What seems to be the problem here is how opposition parties perceive the commission towards elections and how the commission responds to such perception and the criticism.
Apologies.
Okay, good. Yes, I'm looking at the precipitous drop to 34, the lowest ever. Because if you look at the trend, it used to be 54 thereabouts, at least 60, 54. And I think 2012 or 14, it dropped to about 37. But then it picked up again. Then after 2020, it went flat to the 34 where we have right now. And I'm beginning to think that perhaps that intervention by the president in the affairs, that dramatic intervention, actually, I should describe very unexpected intervention of the president in terms of how the previous chairperson of the commission was fired, if I should use the word, that immediately created a new perception. Because mind you, towards that election, 2016 election, the opposition then said that if they won the elections, they are going to displace her. It was a public.
Yeah.
And truly, the president came in, and within a couple or 3 years, that came to pass. And the circumstances of dismissing the commission chairperson was also strange. In fact, I didn't know at all that it was such a simple process that an individual, not signatures, in many jurisdictions, they will ask for a certain number of signatures before such a move could be made. But a single individual wrote a petition to the president, and the president simply explained that he was simply a conveyor belt, sent it to the Supreme Court, the Chief Justice, I should say, and somehow they had their own panel, discuss matters, maybe interview some people, and made a decision. And that event, in my view, has really tarnished the Electoral Commission. So the people presently managing commission, I don't blame them. I think they have been appointed in circumstances that created doubt about their credibility. And that seems to have sustained or given venom to the opposition to be able to consistently chastise them. So I think that has added to the public perception of the commission. And that could explain why just the last 4 years or so, the index has fallen so deeply. Other than that, the process is correct. And now Kojo also said that perhaps the commission, with a few weeks left, the question is whether they can really make it up in some way.
Yeah, and Prof, this sets us up for a very tense next few days, weeks going into the elections, considering where we are with the trust in the EC at 28%, an all-time low. It really sets us up, depending on the outcome, for anybody to contest it. And then the EC itself will lack the grounds to defend itself to extent where they can convince, I guess, majority of the people who were surveyed, because people will look at the outcome of the survey and say, if you are accused of, say, rigging the elections, the evidence says people don't trust you anyway. So how does the EC then go about convincing the majority of Ghanaians that the process was free, fair, and transparent? I mean, that is a challenge that the EC has now, does it not?
Certainly. And it's not an easy challenge, and it's not easy for them to get out of it because of the closeness of the elections. It's not going to be easy at all. But I think if they can consistently be transparent as they have started doing, like, for instance, opening up the IPAC for media coverage, announcing I think for the second time that the ballots will be counted at the regional level, that's the presidential ballots. That will mean that anybody can monitor these things from the regions and get to know who won. So the so-called strong room that was suspected to be where some magics were done to change numbers will not be relevant anymore. Because if the presidential results are announced at all the 16 regional centers before being transmitted to the so-called strong room, then there's no problem there. So I think if all of us can support the commission in this process, this new opening that we have, then hopefully those who monitor it closely can reconfirm what the commission would say.
And the problem, I hear you say emphatically the part of the solution between now and December 7 is in ultra transparency, just these my own words, but something really extraordinary must happen in the transparency measures that the Electoral Commission adopts in this process, that the days that is left, that then can then provide a basis for them to, I guess, improve public perception and public trust.
Yes, and
Okay.
I'm also saying that the EC needs to be supported. When I'm saying supported, doesn't mean we should throw ourselves behind them for whatever they do. But in terms of adding to the monitoring process, we, the civil society group, as I'm sure CDD will be doing, the party themselves, their monitors at the various centers, especially now that we are counting these things at the regional station, the presidential ballots. You see, if we do that, then we give legitimacy to the outcomes, not from the strong room, where the EC alone controls. Of course, it's open to party reps, but it will be done at the regional centers. I'm talking now about the presidential ballots, you see, because that's what the problem is. That's where the suspicions are. So I'm saying that this new approach to transparency, if we all cooperate and do our part at the regional centers, of course, from the polling stations to the regional centers, then you can predict the outcomes even before the EC announces the final result.
And Prof, I want to bring in Daniel Dumelevu and, of course, Xavier Kujo into the conversation very briefly. And Daniel, to you first. I see, and I'm coming to the corruption question. The question was asked, who is corrupt? The Electoral Commission, if you look at it, was the 6th worst corrupt institution when that question was asked. Has that got anything to do with the trust levels that we've seen? It's historically low levels that the barometer is throwing up?
Thank you very much, Mensah, and good evening to my panel members and your viewers as well. Let me begin by first saying that one of the directive principles of state policy, which is very dear to my heart, is that one which is stated in Clause 8 of Article 35, which says that the state shall take steps to eradicate corrupt practices and abuse of power. So that is a very important directive principle of state policy. Now, when we talk about state or government, we have 3 arms. And these 3 arms all seem to be very high in the level of corruption. So where does this leave us? Because the presidency is supposed to be at the champion, and they are very high up there. The legislature, which is supposed to supervise and make sure the right thing is done, they are up there. When you and I, we are aggrieved or we are not happy, we have to run to the judiciary, and they are also up there.
I mean, the top 5 most corrupt institutions are the 3 arms of government that you've mentioned. They are in the top 5.
Yes, the policeman who comes in to ensure that the right thing is done is number 1. So where are we now? Does it mean we are running to a situation where when you hit me, I hit you back because I may not get justice? Or what is it? So it's very disturbing. And let me be very candid with you. This corruption issue is not just a perception, as we will many times want to rubbish it. Last week, I was in another event run by Imani Ghana, where they were looking at fiscal recklessness. I was surprised they choose the heading as recklessness instead of fiscal responsiveness. But they said, no, they are measuring the recklessness. And things are getting out of hands. So if things keep happening like this, and there are no consequences, as I've been saying, corruption is becoming so endemic and entrenched in our society because there are no consequences. So it becomes easy for every institution to become corrupt. In fact, you should be worried as a head of institution if you are identified to be that high in corruption. Be you the judiciary, be you the legislature, electoral commission, etc. So I think I would like to add my voice to what my colleagues have already said, that especially as we are in an election period, and the election is very important for the survival of this country. We need peace in this country. What Electoral Commission can do is to show us the role to be played by everybody in this election. I think they should go all out and tell us what is their role, what is the role of the police, what is the role of the army. And if we see army being moved left and right as if we are in a war zone, what will they do? They should give us some comfort that nobody is going to come in with guns to intimidate people and scare people and etc. Those discussions should happen, and they should show it. That look, we've had discussion with the leadership of the army. We have had discussion with the police. We have had discussion with the government. This is not going to happen, etc. To give us the comfort. And I believe that with the robustness of the process itself, also already in place, we shall have a peaceful election. But you see, let's not reduce this to only election. There are several issues that corruption touches on. If they are abusing our resources, what do we do? Like I told you about the fiscal irresponsibility or recklessness. You look at the Auditor General's report, and it seems it doesn't ring a bell in the ears of government at all that anything is happening. And this is a government that has moved the country from taxation to robbery. I keep insisting that what we are doing today is no more taxation. We've gone beyond taxation. We are now robbing the people. In fact, even if your money is in your pocket, government is ready to pick it. And if we do that, and all that we see is how they are using our monies. You use 58 million to go and dig the most expensive hole in human history, and nothing is happening. We are all told that there's going to be a sky train. We paid $3 million. Where is it? We are told Palugu Dam, there's about 11.9 million paid for it. A host of them. So I think we must look at this institution and ask the leaders, are they not ashamed of themselves?
Let's put that question, because in the midst of all that is the judiciary, the courts, the judges and the magistrates. I have the spokesperson for the Ghana Bar Association. And as you know, the Bar Association tends to speak for the courts and the judiciary because the judges don't speak for themselves. So Sabia, how is the GBA reacting to the evidence that when the question was asked who is corrupt, judges and magistrates came in the fifth most corrupt? When trust question was asked, trust institutions, the courts scored its lowest mark yet at 35%. This is the lowest it's scored in the 12 years of the Afrobarometer. A cumulative minus 22% that the courts have lost in terms of trust that the citizens have for it. Combine that with the fact that it is fifth most corrupt. I mean, the politicians you can expect. I mean, as for the office of the presidency, members of parliament, you know, the police have always been there. But the magistrates and the courts and judges, that must fill you with a bit of trepidation at the Ghana Bar Association.
And good evening to my fellow panelists. I think this is a very serious matter. I am not surprised.
You were not?
But I'm disappointed.
But first, why are you not surprised?
I am not surprised because it is not only the judges or the judiciary that is supposed to be blamed. Who corrupt them? There is no evidence I have read so far that judges or magistrates pay bribes to each other.
But it must be incorruptible.
You wait, I'll come to that. It is the court users.
The court
and
users
sometimes
include
lawyers. Yeah, I won't run away from that. Lawyers do it, I know. But you know, as a judge, I keep saying this every time, if I have the opportunity. Your most important thing to you should be your integrity and also knowledge of the law. But to me, once you decide to be a judge, if you don't have integrity, then you have no business being there. We are getting to where we are getting to because I've listened to Mr. Domelevo. I'll repeat this, I keep saying it. If you take the law on bribery and corruption, which says that the taker and the giver are equally guilty, I wonder how on earth you expect to fight corruption with this kind of law. If the person who was giving the bribe was that principled, would he have given it in the first place? And you expect that same person, after giving bribe, to come and complain or report that he had given bribe to somebody. It will never happen. I think we are just not serious. If we can pass laws or make an ally to go and mine in our forest reserves, why can't we look at this law? Of course, the answer is obvious.
So what, are you proposing that both the giver and the taker should not be equally guilty?
It should be the taker, because you may not know who has sent me, especially in an environment like this. I tell you, if we try that...
But rather, don't you want to preempt it, stop the giver from tempting the taker, and so make it, put the crime on the attempt?
I think
the offer.
As it stands now, the expectation is that the giver will come and report the taker. But the takers are ready to take, because the giver is giving for a certain reason or for a certain benefit.
You mean under our laws?
Yes.
If I give you the bribe,
yes,
and I report you,
will you ever report me? You have given me the bribe to do something for you. You are the beneficiary.
But if I take and I go and report you,
you can't do that because you are equally guilty.
No, but I took it as evidence.
How will you prove that?
No, but if I don't take it, what's the point? I mean, if you attempt to give me the bribe and I reject it, and I go and report you, what's the evidence that you gave me the bribe?
At the point of rejection, what prevents a judge or a magistrate to call in the police? That is where my concern is.
But you come there and I say I haven't offered you any bribe. What's the evidence that I offered you?
Look, now everybody has a phone. If you want to trap such people, it's very easy to trap. I think that we must also look at one thing, at every level, not only in the judiciary. I think our reward system also has a problem. I don't think Ghana is serious about rewarding honest people and people with integrity.
How would you explain that in relations with the judges?
There are some good judges who never get promoted. It's everywhere. It's not only about the judges. If you get to some public institutions, those who are honest and strict are rather enemies of the system, or they are perceived at least to be enemies of the system. How do you run a country like that? Are
you suggesting that the judges are promoted not on merit, but because of favors they've done to political power?
It's a human institution. It cannot always be what we expect. As the bar.
But must they be corrupt?
Whereby if the country is ready to only hail those who have material gains as being successful, what do we expect? So we have lost it. We have to go back to the basics to know that even wealth, if they say wealth, is not only about material, it's not only in material terms. Your integrity alone is enough wealth for you. I have read the autobiography of Richard Branson. Reading that book, the impression I got was that he was getting other people's money to do his business because of the reputation he has built. So why can't we do things like that? Now everybody goes around bosu, honorable. And the sad thing is that our society has become so politically manipulated to the extent that the so-called rich people, who everybody knows, including the poor, that they are responsible for the poor people's poverty, we see the poor people defending them. So for me, the judges have a lot to do, but we must also stop going to them to influence them. But I expect the judges, when attempts are made, they should call in the police. How difficult it is. I have not heard any judge done that.
But what you're saying is actually serious. The Afrobarometer is actually picking up the fact that the judges and magistrates are corrupt, fifth most corrupt, which means on a daily basis possibly, lawyers, court workers, court clerks, whatever it is, they are offering bribes possibly or are attempting to induce the judges. But nobody is filing the report. No judge is calling in the police for arrest. At least we don't hear it.
I've not heard one. And it is this way. You see, we all justify it by saying that the systems are not working. Who is to come and make them work for us?
But what that means is that the judges are actually taking the bribes and accepting to be induced.
That is why I'm saying that, I'm suggesting that unless and until we change the law, this will continue. Because nobody is Father Christmas to come and give you a bribe and go away. He expects a certain result. Once he gets the result, he wants him to come and complain, lodge a complaint. He will not do it. Even if he doesn't, because he's been involved, it will be difficult for him to go and report. And mostly they succeed.
Say that again, that he actually succeed in bribing the judges to do their bidding.
But assuming I want this case to go in my favor, and it's gone in my favor, having paid you bribe, why should I go and report to you? I've gotten what? Even if I didn't succeed, next time maybe I'll have to try another means.
You're saying justice is on sale here?
That is what we're hearing per the report.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what form of bribe that a judge, I would not like to limit corruption, the definition of corruption.
To only taking a bribe,
taking money. But once you abuse an entrusted position, authority, or power for personal or private gain, that's corruption. That is corruption. So I think it behoves all of us. But we have just lost our values because, society is made up
But you paint a catastrophic picture.
Yes.
That the Afrobarometer Survey, one of the most credible surveys anywhere in the world, is actually telling us that in this country, our justice is for sale. And the judges and magistrates who are taking the bribes, even if they're not reporting the people who are attempting to bribe them, right? But what is the GBA doing? Because you know this, the evidence is there. Anas did it and exposed it. We saw it. The Chief Justice then attempted to put in place some measures to try and deal with it. It's been years since that happened. And you look at the Afrobarometer trend, well, the court's reputation has been a consistent decline since 2019, and it's at its lowest. So nothing has changed, really. It's getting worse, even after the Anas. Well, we all thought it was a watershed moment, never again. The evidence doesn't back that.
Evans, let me make this point. I think I've made it before. There are two main things that are considered before a judge is appointed: your integrity and your knowledge of the law. But once, as an individual, you have elected consciously to become a judge, it means that you are ready to uphold your integrity. But I don't think we are seeing that. I don't think we are seeing that. Because if that is what actually is happening, then we shouldn't be hearing what we are hearing. This report shouldn't be telling us this. I expect a situation where I will hear one day that a judge has called in the police because somebody has at least attempted to bribe the judge. Don't forget, when the CJ launched her program last year, she described certain group of people called brokers, who I see as interface between the public and the judiciary. We have to find a way of dealing, driving away all those people.
But that is such an indictment, is it not? That for the Chief Justice to say that, which means she knows those brokers. But to only complain about it publicly and not hand them over to the police or invite an investigation, that in itself is a monumental indictment on the Chief Justice and the judiciary that she needs.
Well, she is the head of the judiciary. I think Mr. Domolevu made that point that if you're a head of any of these institutions, you have a lot of work to do. You should be worried.
Yeah, but she's admitted publicly that they are brokers.
That's what
you say the right thing to do is to hand the brokers over to the police for prosecution.
But you've not been able to identify any of them.
No, but to say you must know the existence.
That is when
to know that they are
brokers come in, because even if there is a chain and the end of the chain is the judge, you should be able to trace everybody if you are principled as a judge. But I think that because it's become endemic, as Mr. Domolevu said, corruption has become endemic, it's normal for everybody now. Try to be very strict now and see. Mr. Domolevu himself is an example.
Yeah.
He's an example. But the good thing is that
corruption will fight you, I think
I'm not sure with his situation he's hungry now. I think he's the happiest person.
Yeah, he got international gigs and,
It doesn't really matter. I am a local boy from my village.
What I mean is that
the little integrity I have is the riches that I have.
He's not been rewarded for that integrity. People think that you must necessarily compromise other than that, but he shows the example.
You see, many of us didn't know of Mr. Domolevu, but with this incident, he's now become a public figure, much more than because of his integrity.
Yes, stay with me. I want to quickly get quick comments on this subject of the courts. And Dr. Kojo Asante, the Afrobarometer, how do you conceptualize the corruption? What is it for you? Is it simply the giving of bribes?
No, I think the question, I don't have the question in front of me, but...
who is corrupt, I think is what it is. How many following people do you think are involved in corruption, or haven't you heard enough about them to say? I think it's this broad question that was asked.
That's the question, and it's translated in multiple languages as well. So the meaning is quite clear. And this is an instrument that has been tested, for the last 25 years. The Afrobarometer started in 1999. So it's been, tested and tested so many times in Ghana that, people know exactly what you're talking about. And for me, I think there are two things I want to say. I feel that we don't realize that the window is closing for Ghana, very quickly. All the indices, if you take all the indices on democratic decline for Ghana, it's not good. And actually, maybe in the last 10, 15 years, the decline has been quite rapid. And the Afrobarometer has shown that very clearly. If you look at a lot of the countries that have unraveled in the sub-region, you can see a certain pattern in terms of the drivers of dissatisfaction for democracy and decline in support for democracy. A lot of that has to do with the efficacy of elections or bad elections. Corruption is one of those things. Supply of performance of government in terms of economy and other things. Equality before the law is also one of the key things. So, I mean, basically, good governance and democratic quality is a big issue. And it looks like we got into a place where we've stagnated. And we are not making any progress. We feel stuck.
In fact, in some cases, we are on a decline.
Yeah, in some cases, we're completely deteriorated. So, and we are not getting any response from the political class. So, and if you go on the corruption side, if you look at the CPI trends, all the countries that have stagnated for 3 data points. So in Ghana, for example, we've hit 43 points, I think, for the last 3 CPIs. After 3 points, your decline goes sharper. It goes down, it plunges. And many countries have gone through that. So all the indices are pointing to a huge decline. It's almost like you are going towards a precipice and about to get into an abyss. And I think everybody's raising the alarm. But sometimes, typical like how we have dealt with the Galamsey issue, we're playing around with it. And we just, after the talk, we just go and do a song and dance again, hoping that somehow everything will do. I really think that if we don't do something fundamental, something more radical, and that's why I'm coming back to the point that you were raising about whether it's the Chief Justice and her plan, because she raised that issue in her plan last year. I think it's this year, if I recall, where she laid out this plan and she raised the issue about corruption in the judiciary and what she wanted to do about it. But it cannot be business as usual. She has to be radical about it if she's going to confront it. So anybody that wants to make an effort to, begin to walk this back, there has to be something serious and fundamental, intervention.
That must change. And I want to bring in Prof on that same question there.
It'll be very, very.
Yeah, Prof, how radical must the change be? Because this trend is alarming. It's been like that, and it's been at its lowest now. What do we do to arrest this trend?
Very radical measures needed. When I talk of radical measures, it includes radicalizing the Constitution, reviewing it. Look, all the countries Ghanaians like to cite as models for development, none of them had the kind of politics that we have in this country. None of them had institutions as rotten as we have in this country. None of them had leadership with no integrity as we have in this country. Name them: Singapore, Malaysia, South Korea, and even Rwanda today. And they never played the kind of politics that we are playing here. Look, if you are serious about development, we got to be radical.
Well,
look, yes?
I wanted to be, I just have a minute to wrap up. If you can bullet for me, what is the one most important radical change that you propose on the back of this?
It cannot be just one.
Okay, I want to go around the table and try and get quick thoughts on that, if you may. Your top
The
one.
Leadership number one.
Okay.
We need a president who exudes integrity and is able to impose that on those that he appoints, period.
You have two options this December. Do you see that quality in any of the two individuals who most likely will be president next year?
You want me to be very honest with you?
Yes.
None.
Okay. Daniel Domelevo, what do you say? What's your verdict? What's that one singular thing that if you don't do anything at all, you must do to try and begin to change this narrative?
We've had too much talking. We must start walking the talk. When you promise that you will protect the public purse, you must go ahead and protect the public purse. Now you listen to the presidential candidates, they are making promises all over. The problem is when they get the power, they start running away from the promises. So they must start to ensure that there are consequences for misbehavior.
Yeah.
And I keep insisting on this, that whereas as long as you can get away with misbehavior, corruption will continue growing and growing as we are seeing.
And I think that's a point too that Saber you made, that if the judges want to fix this, they must act. Don't just send them away, but report them. Let's see some action there. I mean, first of all, quickly wrap up. What's the GBA doing in relation in conjunction with the judiciary to try and fix this? Is there anything happening there? Very briefly, if you like to say.
Well, we have a court monitoring committee, but it's based on information that we have.
Are you getting information? People coming?
No, but they are benefiting. So that is it. Okay. So for me, I would say that to resolve all these issues, we should learn to reward honesty and integrity. When people are being rewarded based on that, I'm sure at least some number will get discouraged.
Okay. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your evening.